Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me on another uh, audio recording. So, in this, I wanted to just quickly explain how I uh, successfully got the ex-narc removed from my home. So, real quick, if those who don't know, or for those who don't know, I am in the military, active duty U.S. Air Force, and our rules, or the military rule, is if you're married to a non-military member, and say if you get into a fight, um, the non-military member attacks the active duty military member. So the active duty military member is the victim, and the cops get involved. When the cops get involved, the military gets involved as well, like your leadership and everything, which is quite embarrassing and whatnot. But anyway, I say that to say this. When you have a spouse that's non-military and you're the active duty member, the military member is made to leave the home. And the reason that the active duty military member is made to leave the home, even if they are the victim, even if they were the person that was innocent in the whole ordeal, you're still made to leave because the non-military member is considered a dependent, and dependents have to be taken care of at all costs. So if they remove the dependent from the home, where's the dependent going? They're covered under the military, the active duty military person. So basically, the way the military looks at it is, or the way they look at it is, the non-active duty member, the civilian, doesn't have a place to go, and all of their money and shelter and all that stuff is and should be covered by the active duty person. And that sucks when it comes down to it, because I've been in that situation plenty of times where the ex-narcissist and I would get into an argument, it would get escalated, and this was before I even knew what a narcissist was. And, I don't like a lot of, I don't like confrontations, I don't like drama, I don't like a lot of that. So it takes a lot for me to blow up or get to a certain point where I'm screaming and yelling and all that good stuff. But the ex-narc was relentless, and he would needle me and needle me and needle me no matter, how I tried to, calm the situation or run away from it. But it was just like he knew what to say and do to get me off kilter. And we had cops called in the past where, I was falsely arrested and yada, yada, yada. And there were times where a lot of times actually, where I had to be removed from the home, even though I was the victim, because he was the dependent. And so I'm going to fast forward. So basically, the ex-narcissist is also an ex-military member. We got married after he got out of the military. And so he knew a lot of these rules, and he knew a lot of the, just a lot of things that one wouldn't know if they weren't in the military. So he pretty much knew how to play the system. He knew how to, get around a lot of stuff. And so when I found out, that my ex-narc had been cheating and taking our kids around certain females and basically living a whole nother life right under my nose. Like, I would go to work and, assuming he was going to work, and I'd get home and, he'd come home like nothing had happened. But that sixth sense was always that intuition was always kicking in, like something is not right. And it had gotten to a point where he was starting to not hide the fact that he was involved with someone else, constantly having his phone on him and really engrossed in a text message conversation back and forth, and smiling and laughing and glancing over at me to see if I was paying attention or if he was getting at me. And, we're human. Obviously, if you are in a committed relationship and someone is doing these things where, they're basically showing you that, there's a possibility that they're talking to someone else or whatnot, you're going to get a little jealous. But, I didn't let it get to me, or at least I didn't let him see me get upset over it. But I started to put a lot of, I put things together in my mind where, this is not adding up right, or, and my children actually started speaking out about it. And it's really sad because my twin daughters can't speak. My twin daughters were 3 at the time. And my son was 5 at the time when all this was going on. And so it just, it got really hard to live in the home with all of this chaos and underlying crazy making. And, he was gaslighting me all the time, telling me I'm crazy, it's not what you think, you're insecure, and all that stuff that narcissists say when you're on to them. So finally, I just, got all my stuff together one night, and he had started going to the gym. He was starting to go to the gym a lot. He said he got a what do you call it? He ended up getting not an instructor, but I don't know, someone that does the one-on-one. It'll come to me. Basically to help you with your fitness and to help, give techniques and whatnot to get a better body. That was unusual because he had never, ever been interested in stuff like that. So, on top of the text messaging back and forth with a particular person, and getting a personal trainer, that's what I was trying to think of. Getting a personal trainer, constantly going to the gym, my intuition just going off like crazy. One night I decided, on a Friday night after work, I decided, you know what, when he heads to the gym one night, I'm going to pack up my stuff, get my kids, and we're gonna, pack up what I could, because I couldn't move the whole house, obviously, at short notice. But I was like, I'm going up the street and I'm staying with my dad. So, thankfully, I am stationed right now in my hometown. And with that being said, my dad, who is not from here, is still living here. And, thank God, because it was just easy to pick up and move into my dad's home with my kids, just to clear my head and to get a better perspective on what was happening. And so, mind you, the ex-narc was caught off guard when he came home and realized we were gone. And at this point, I was in the stage of the devaluing stage. I was catching a lot of negativity from the ex-narc. And, because unbeknownst to me, he had already secured the new supply, and I was being treated like the scum of the earth, or a piece of chewing gum on the bottom of his shoe. So it was a lot of negative put downs and whatnot towards me. So I just felt at the time when I left and went to stay at my dad's, which wasn't that far away from my original home, I felt like it was just for my sanity and peace of mind and for my children's safety, it was just better to just remove ourselves from that, just so that I could figure out what was going on 100%. So the ex-narc, he had contacted me and was just like, basically saying, yeah, whatever, you can stay where you're at, but where's my kids, and whatever. And honestly, children to narcissists, even if it's their own blood, they're nothing but pawns to narcissistic people or individuals. Children are used as props, to gain future prospects, new supplies for the narcissist. So anyways, the ex-narc is left in this pretty decent or pretty nice townhome, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. Everything was, all to himself, living room, dining room, kitchen. He had the whole place to himself while I had my children living at my dad's house. The ex-narc actually was very happy with this arrangement. He would always bring up the fact that he was my dependent, and until something was, legally documented or on paper, as far as like a legal separation or a finalized divorce decree, until that was said and done, he had every right to live in the home that I had temporarily left. Mind you, I was paying the monthly rent. I was paying for everything. This ex-narc had it made. He was literally living rent-free in this home, and he was right. He was the dependent still, whether we were living together or not. And it was my duty to take care of him until a divorce was finalized on paper. So I was extremely perplexed, and the ex-narc would constantly say, I don't care if it takes a year or how long it takes. Basically I'm paraphrasing, but basically he was staking his claim, and he was going to chill in this home all by himself and do whatever the heck he wanted until everything was finalized and that I could do nothing about it. And I was devastated because I knew he was right. And honestly, I didn't want to stay with my dad for as long as, for however long it was going to take. If it was going to take a year, my dad, God bless him, he definitely has a bachelor's pad. It's not the biggest or nicest place to be staying. Definitely not nicer than my home that I had temporarily left. So anyway, but I was nonetheless grateful to be there because I had peace of mind for the most part, as well as my children. And so I had so much anguish and confusion going on during this time, and I really missed living in my house. My children also missed living at our house, because they had everything there. That's where they, had their beds and their toys and whatnot. And they were confused as well as far as what was going on and why mom and dad weren't together. But you can't, you can only inform your children of so much just to protect them. And so anyway, fast forward, a few weeks went by, and I did my very best to try and talk to people and ask questions about what can I do in a situation. The ex-narc has basically staked his claim in a home that he doesn't pay rent for, that he doesn't do anything other than, say that he's a civilian dependent of an active duty military member, and there was nothing that I could do to get him out unless a divorce was finalized. And no one seemed to have a good answer on that. Most people that I asked military wise were saying, well, he kind of has a point there. Or unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And, I have, once I had gotten proof that the ex-narc was definitely seeing a new person, a new woman, and had a new supply, that's when I started, as devastating as it was at that time, I started looking up all kinds of things online to see, just trying to get some questions answered, because the ex-narc wasn't saying anything. He wasn't giving me anything to go off of. So that's when I finally learned about what true narcissist or what narcissism truly is, what someone with BPD disorder was. And the first video on YouTube, or the first YouTuber that I honed in to during this time, was ASSC Direct. His name is Quinn, and he is a lifesaver. It was like divine intervention, like something sent me to this man's video links, and everything that he was describing and talking about, it just made sense. It clicked and it spoke to me. Even though he was a man who had gone through this with a woman, it was the same situation, just different genders. So he definitely broke down, just from his experience and from dealing with different people, what exactly was happening. That I was considered, that narcissists are very black and white in their minds. So when they start devaluing someone, they're the black, and the new source or new supply that they're seeing or grooming is considered white in their minds. If someone's black, someone has to be white. If someone's white, someone has to be black. It's always black and white. There's no gray. So I was like, oh, wow. So I'm considered black in this narcissist mind, which, was fine, because I had gone through enough emotionally and physically with him. That was kind of a relief to find out that there was a new source in the picture. So that helped me to file for divorce. The ex-narc had brought up, I had said in the past a lot of times that I wanted to divorce, but during those times we were living overseas or stationed overseas, and it was really hard for me to go forth or to move forward with that. So I basically had to wait till we got to the States. At this point, the narcissist actually brought up divorce first once we got to the US. And, I didn't beg or grovel or ask why. I was very nonchalant about it. And honestly, I was really numb and robotic by this time. Like, this narcissist had drained me of everything. And like I said, at that point, I was relieved to know that he had found someone else, because that just meant that I could finally move on, with a clear conscience, and move forward in life with my children. So, like I said, I wasn't getting any good information or anything that I could run with from anybody in the military as far as what can I do with the ex-narc being the way he is, and I'm paying on a house that he's living in. And he did actually have a job at this time, and so he was just collecting a paycheck every month or every 2 weeks or whatnot. and living rent free and doing whatever the heck he wanted to do in life. So the last straw for me was I ended up going to military legal office on base. And, I ended up leaving that office feeling really defeated because I left with more questions than answers, and they pretty much, seemed clueless on the whole situation and basically repeated the same stuff that non-legal professionals were telling me, which was there's really not much you can do until you get a divorce finalized, which I was not excited to hear, obviously, because once I secured a lawyer and everything, I was told it would probably be a year before everything got finalized. So I was just feeling really defeated at this point. And, something was like tugging at me, mentally, like literally like saying like, go to the your housing department's front office. And at first I was thinking, why would I do that? I mean, they have no power to get this man out of my house. And even if they did, I'm still held accountable by the military. But I only had like an hour or so before they closed. So I was like, you know what? It's, what could it hurt? So I ended up racing over to the housing department's front office. And long story short, I go in, I tell the woman at the front desk what the issue was. And I was just like, is there anything that I can do at this point? Because I'm just, I don't have anything else left, no other options. And she asked me what my ex-narc's name was. And I'm like looking at her like, why does that even matter? I just, that has nothing to do with the situation. But I ended up telling her, and she goes, I know who you're talking about. I know that person. And I'm like, okay, so, and she says, that person likes to play games, and we don't play games here at, this leasing office. And I was just like, well, obviously I knew just by dealing with the ex-narc that he likes to play a lot of games, but this person was like, yeah, he came in here looking, or actually saying that he was interested in getting a home in the neighborhood and renting something. And I guess they had kept 2 possible vacant homes on hold for him. But he never returned their calls or emails or whatnot. So basically it left a sour taste in their mouth that he just left them on a hook. Which is not, that's not surprising coming from the ex-narcissist, or my ex-narcissist. So she goes, stay right there. Let me go pull your file. Let me go get your leasing paperwork, and we'll see what we can do. And I was like, okay, like whatever. I'm trying to, stay hopeful, but at the same time, I was, like I said, really upset that I was in this position. So she comes back and she tells me this the narcissist is not even listed as someone on your lease other than an occupant. And because of that, it was easy to, delete him off of the paperwork, and therefore he could not reside in the housing anymore. And so she gave me a pen and she said, these are your occupants, which was, they were listed individually, and it was the ex-narc and my children, our 3 children. So she says, cross out the person that you don't want in the house and initial next to it. So obviously I crossed out the ex-narc and I initialed it and I dated it. And she closes the folder and she says, now he's considered a trespasser. And I was like, wow, okay, that's great. But again, I'm still held under military rules. And she says, okay, this guy's standing right next to me. He is the locksmith, and he's going over to change your locks. And I said, wait a minute, right now? And she says, right now. And I was just like, oh my gosh, everything just started happening so fast. Like, it was making my head spin. I had no clue. Like, I was elated and I was confused. It was just a lot of stuff going on. And so I remember one of the main managers happened to walk in on the conversation. She was hearing about someone going over to change locks and this and this and that. And she said, can I call you into my office just to get the whole picture of what's going on? And I said, sure. So I went into her office, and she closed the door. She got all the information, and she agreed that that was the right move. And she also pointed out that she wanted to make sure the cops were involved, the military police, just in case the ex-narc tried to pull something that was, tried to do something or say something that would hurt me or try to attack me. So she was just trying to make sure everything was covered. And so, so he was crossed out of the lease as an occupant of the home, which, like the lady at the front desk said, he was now considered a trespasser. The locksmith was getting ready to go over to my home to change the locks. And the MPs were called, the military police, to assist in removing the ex-narc. I then got on the phone with my shirt, and in the military, the shirt is part of your leadership chain, and I informed him of what was happening. And thankfully, the ex-narc's sister, oldest sister, she's currently stationed here as well, and so she has a house, she had a house at the time with her husband and child, and I would not be breaking any rules if I kicked the ex-narc out and he had a place to go. So I informed my first shirt and leadership of what was going on, as well as my supervisor, just to make sure that was covered, because they were going to find out eventually. And my first shirt at the time and leadership definitely backed me up on everything and just said, if I needed anything, let them know. And so literally after I got off the phone, the supervisor of the housing department, the locksmith, the MPs, and myself all got in our vehicles and went to my house where the ex-narc was. He had just gotten off work. And the supervisor was the first one. Like, we literally went, we were like a force to be reckoned with. Like, it was amazing how everything just happened. It was definitely a blessing. So anyway, the housing supervisor ends up knocking on a door, and the ex-narc answers, and he's looking like, what the heck are you guys doing here? And she explained to him that he was no longer a resident and that he had to vacate the premises. And I'm just like standing there, like looking at him like, yeah, buddy, your time is up. Keep it moving. And the first thing he said, or first thing he asked was, does the shirt know? Because it was his favorite thing to have the shirt on speed dial, because he always ran and, spewed lies anytime he could, just to get sympathy and people on his side first. And so I let him know, yes, the first shirt is aware, and, everything's legit. You've got to leave. And he's looking just really, really confused, but more so upset and just, I can't believe this is happening. And so he ends up saying, okay, well, I'm going to the backyard and I'm going to pull up the, what do you call it? The dish. We had Dish Network at the time. So he stated he was going to go in the back and take up the dish because that was the only thing he actually paid for in the house. And I remember the cop telling him, you're not going to do anything other than get your stuff and get out. And you've got about 5 minutes, buddy, because, if we get any further pushback from you, we'll get the city cops involved and they're not going to be so nice. And I was just like, wow, this is really happening. And this is just amazing. And so, excuse me. So, I could feel his eyes, like the ex-narc's eyes, just burning, searing holes through me, just because he was just so upset and taken. You've got to take these ex-narcissists off guard. You've got to catch them off guard because they're constantly thinking, 10 steps ahead of people. And they like to think of themselves as, so smart, such geniuses, and everyone else, anyone that they can con or manipulate are such dummies and they deserve what they get, good or bad. And so he was just really upset that I had got one over on him like this. And he's like stomping up the stairs, trying to look for anything that he could grab that belonged to him. And I let him know, hey, you've got options, you've got a girlfriend to take up with as far as a house or somewhere to live, and you also have your older sister who has a home not too far from here. So it's not like you're going to be on the street, panhandling. So that was kind of my little jab or 2 cents to throw in there. And he was just like, I don't have a girlfriend. I'm like, okay, well, whatever. You need to remove yourself and you need to hurry it up. And so, long story short, I know he had told the cops, like, he didn't have, 5 minutes wasn't enough time to leave and that he needed more time than that to get his things in order. And so, it was getting late. And the cop, he knew that we had children in the CDC, which is the daycare for the military. And he said, the CDC is closing soon, ma'am. If you could let's give him a solid hour to get some things together. If you could compromise, let's do that. Let him have an hour to get his stuff together. And during this time, you go and pick up your kids and head over to your dad's house. That way they, don't have to see all of this. And, with that, I agreed. And the cop asked me before I left, was there anything that the ex-narc should not be taking out of the house? And honestly, I didn't care. At that point, I didn't care if he took every piece of furniture, if he could, in that 1 hour. I didn't care what he took. I just wanted him to be out of that house. He could have had everything in that home. And, if I had to start over with buying furniture and stuff, I could have cared less because I was going to have my house back. I was going to have my peace of mind back. And, that definitely helped with the divorce process. So yeah, the ex-narc, he thought he was doing something by taking things that had some, expensive value towards it. Like we had this $500 blender that I never used. He ended up taking that once I ended up coming back to the house after his removal. And, some framed pictures that, that were really expensive that, he just tried to make it hurt as much as he thought he could. And honestly, it was laughable because I was like, well, the picture frame and pictures, I can definitely rebuy those. I had the pictures that I wanted still saved, digitally saved. And, even though the frame was expensive, it was something from Italy, I still have the information to order another one whenever I felt like it. So, yeah, when I got back in the home a few days later, I noticed some of those things were gone. But again, I happily departed ways with those items, just because I had my peace of mind. And yeah, that's when I, secured everything and was moving forward with the divorce. And yes, it did take a year to finalize everything, but I did have, emotional support, family support, and I had my house back. And my children and I, we were at peace with everything that had happened. And yeah, that's the story of how I got the ex-narc out of my home for good. If you all have any questions or a similar story like this, please leave it in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And I'll see you all later in the next video or audio recording.